you have access to a spirit, a strength that enlarges and empowers you. Even better, you don't need to wait for the next big movement. You can heal the world. It's time for governance by grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. Very good day, my friend. Glad to be back here with you. Hope I don't make you laugh and start a coughing fit.
Yeah, so I have been going through some medical issues. We canceled a recording that we were going to do. This is the longest gap in our history. Right now, we're sitting here right before Good Friday. Easter's this coming weekend, and we want to talk about Good Friday. But I'm to get through my cough. I probably momentarily from now, I'm going to be putting a cough drop in my mouth. It does help. It doesn't necessarily stop it. And yes, I've seen the doctor and I've been through all the paces. So it is what it is. I'm better enough now that I really want to power through. I miss being able to do this. And I thought about this episode, Bill, for nearly a year. Came across an article that I've shared with you that will kind of form some basis for our conversation. I don't know how close we'll hew to it as we're talking. I said I want to do a Good Friday episode next year. So I literally calendared this and said, we're going to sit down and do a Good Friday episode because I believe we have something unique and special to say.
Well, that's being kind. Wait till you hear what I have to say.
Okay. I hope so. I hope it's also unique and special, but we have built this show in part on the philosophy of Rene Girard.
Sure. Yeah.
And I come to this as a libertarian. This is what I do all day. Like I'm involved in some kind of libertarian adjacent activity in my professional life all day long. I sit and watch news at night, probably 3 to 4 nights a week, trying to keep up with everything that's going on so that I can be aware and comment and so forth. And so my whole life kind of surrounds libertarianism. The show has had more libertarianism than Girard and Grace as a result. But we have hit this theme before. And the most important episode that we did in the history of the show was episode 88, which is called Rene Girard, the Founding of Religion and State. It is the most important episode in the history of Gracearchy. We will put it down in the show notes. But it's not the only time we've touched it. Back when we were at the Aho Network, when we first started off this show, episode 37 was Rene Girard and Mimetic Desire, where we basically got into the beginnings of the whole Mimetic Desire thing. And it's something we won't have time to cover today. So you can go back and you can reference that episode. We touched on it again while we were kind of transitioning from Aho to Zero Aggression Project as our primary platform on YouTube. A lot of the Aho shows, the only place you can get them is on Aho. We don't have, those shows aren't on Rumble. They're not on YouTube on Zero Aggression. So we touched on it on episode 40 on Colin Kaepernick's knee. We touched on the episode, the portion of the discussion that had involved sacrifice, which is largely where we're going to be sitting today here on this Good Friday episode. And then we also met with David Gornoski in episode 92 to discuss how it unveils the state, Girard's mechanism does. And we did an episode that was so serendipitous called Mimetic Mirror, which is where Jerry Bowyer explored the parable of Jesus' eye, which was very much done in a Girardian type of lens. All of those episodes we're going to put down in the show notes for people to go back and access where they were originally broadcast, with the hope that you will take the time. You will find enough interest in what we have to say today, and that you will take time. I want to say one more thing before we get going. I believe that libertarianism itself is at a bit of a crossroads. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this that I won't get into here today. But I have believed from the time that before we started the show, that what has been missing in the ability to advance a successful libertarianism has been grace. And it's specifically grace for the scapegoat. Now, a long time ago, since I've been at this for so many years now, I'm approaching 3 decades. And as I have been at this for so long, professionally speaking, for more than 25 years now, I believe, or I have observed, would probably be more accurate, that libertarians root for the underdog. They have this real propensity to find the person who is being victimized and say, wait a minute, That's our person here. And we might even talk about a couple of those victims over the course of the discussion we're going to have today. But that rooting for the underdog, it's kind of like hyper empathy. Libertarians have been criticized for a lack of bedside manner, but the fact of the matter is that they really do pick out the most indefensible characters in the story frequently and say, what about them? What about them? And that is very much a Girardian impulse, as you'll understand us discussing the scapegoat today. What the significance of doing a discussion on this particular season in the calendar, where we're approaching, here we have Good Friday right before us and Easter coming up this weekend. This is the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Is that these are the discussion that goes on within Christianity is about the atonement, an atonement theory.
Right.
And we may go back and, if we have time, and talk about some of the biblical atonement theories, Judeo-Christian approach here, because there's parts of it that show up in the Old Testament and parts that show up in the New that are all ripe for discussion. This roots all the way back to Yom Kippur, the idea of a scapegoat that would be sent off with the sins of the people on it by the high priest. But it specifically is dealing with atonement. Now, atonement's a compound and made-up word. It's not found in the Bible. But what it means, and the reason we have it, William Tyndale gave it to us when he was translating the Bible into English. The reason that we have it is because it basically, think of it as a compound word. At-One-Ment. How do we come together as a people and as a society? Because there is a strong human compelling need to have relationship, and obviously those relationships have to be lived in peace. So how do we achieve at-one-ment with one another? And I believe that the cross is the best model for this. Maybe you have another model that you prefer or use. I'm not trying to shut you down here, but to me, understanding this story helps me to look upward and see something that maybe it's harder to see when I'm in the midst of the trees, right? Maybe I have a better view of the whole landscape than each of the individual sticks in front of me. And that's largely how I use this and how I come to this discussion today. So we had an article that we were looking at, which is Who is Your Good Friday Scapegoat? And the subtitle was Our Civilization is Built on Cruelty by Tim DeRoche. It was at The Unheard. We will put that down in the show links as well. I encouraged you, Bill. I will share my thoughts, obviously. I'm never shy. But I encouraged you to go through and come up with things that jumped out at you in this piece. And I would like to have your thoughts on this Good Friday weekend.
Well, to summarize Tim DeRoche's piece, he found himself in a Good Friday service at a Catholic church being encouraged to say, along with everyone there, crucify him, crucify him. And it seems to me that the focus that we have on original sin in much of Christianity has diluted the message of the ultimate scapegoat, Jesus Christ, to the place where we've forgotten how to do what Jesus actually taught us to do. And hollering crucify him and reminding ourselves of how bad we are doesn't seem to me to be the way forward. It definitely has nothing to do with grace. It's all about remembering, what Tim DeRoche calls, our basic instinct here. I'm not good with that because I think that there is a way that is not about remembering original sin and, climbing into the swamp with everybody else who wants to remember themselves as original sinners. We had a scapegoat a couple thousand years ago who was supposed to have stopped the need to repeat original sin doctrine, and yet here we are. We had a scapegoat 2,000 years ago who taught that it's about a one-to-one, that the relationship is the most important thing, and that having that relationship is the primary focus of being a Christian, a follower of Jesus. How are we doing with that? We have Christians that aren't about relationships anymore. We have powerful people who claim to be Christians and yet do not practice at an obvious level the two great commandments. Now, I understand, okay, so this is about one-to-one, and scaling up Christianity to a macro government is not anywhere near what Jesus taught it. So we've got that, but let's just throw out a challenge here to the Christians in the world. How's it going? We had a couple of great commandments 2,000 years ago. Where do I see those being practiced? in our world today? Are they happening one-to-one? Are they happening when your kid is a trans kid and you can no longer love them? Are they happening when someone that you care for needs to have an abortion for medical reasons and your doctrine doesn't allow you to extend love to that person? I'm frustrated by this, Jim. You're probably picking that up.
Yeah, I am. And I want to take what you had to say kind of in order, if I could.
Sure, yeah.
I think Girard actually is positing that, agreeing with the idea that we are born in original sin.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that.
And I think he's identifying something very specific that is inescapable about us as human beings. And that is that we're born in a certain milieu. And so the only thing we have, there's two stages to this. The first is called desire. So Girard deals with this concept called mimetic desire. And he says humans want certain things because other human beings want them.
Sure. And that's what Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun.
Okay, but this starts all the way in the nursery. You have two toddlers. They are one grabs a toy. That toy was uninteresting to the second toddler until the first toddler grabbed it.
Oh, sure, right.
And now a conflict will ensue. This is a micro nursery example of a larger concept that happens in the wider world with adults. Adults are in severe denial. Many of them, they believe that they have arrived at all of their desires through rational construction. This is the romantic notion that I am in control of my own destiny. I am without sin. I'm basically a good person. And everything that I've done, I've chosen for myself. These are all my own individual choices. We're unaware of the influences that guide us. There are people that when I've talked to them about this subject, try to say that what Girard is suggesting is that everything is desire, but he never said that. He said that, or is it mimetic desire? He didn't say that. You have certain biological needs; those were already off the table. We obviously, I believe, if there there's just could almost be a neo-Girardianism, we have certain drives that we have to satisfy and fulfill, including reproduction. Right? There is this drive to mate and cohabitate, and these things do drive certain behaviors. But even inside that, we can see desire at play, imitated desire from others. Our entire system of the marketplace operates off of an imitated desire. We are constantly influenced by things and not even aware of what we're influenced about. And the very act of spending time with us right now means that you're being influenced by the thing we're discussing. You could be somewhere else thinking about something else, doing something else, and then that would have some influence on you. But it's the fact that you're sitting here right now that you're influenced by what's being discussed at this very moment. Where you spend your time and who you spend your time with matters immensely. You tell your teenage kids this, it doesn't change as you get older. If you're around a bunch of negative people, if you're around a bunch of people who are living bad lives that are abusive of their own selves and of those around them, you will become more like them, more than likely. You will be influenced by them, maybe even ways that you cannot always detect. And so part of what happens here in this whole Girardian thing is that it's revealed to you who you are. It's revealed that this is the human condition. And when that's...
I have to clarify that because it's not the only human condition.
No,
but one that can exist.
It's the default. I'm going to go so far as to suggest it's the default.
Now we're good, because if you have agency and choose something else. So yes,
right.
It's the
and
default.
So maybe part of that is beginning to be aware that this issue exists.
I'm with you.
Now that I'm aware that it exists, I can begin to try to figure my way out.
Right.
Now, the way that society has dealt with this is to suppress the fact that this exists. That's number one. And almost all of our institutions are designed to kind of hide it. And they've masked it inside a particular piece of violence, which is the importance of the episode today. There is sacrificial violence that is then applied to try to bring everybody together. A scapegoat is designated for our problems. So now you say, hey, we have these two laws, these two great laws, and they are the thing under which we should be operating. And let's clarify what those are. You should love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. That's number one. And you should love your neighbor as yourself. Now, some people are going to discard the love God part, but the love God part has to do with, we have this issue from a Girardian lens of imitation. Who is it we are to get our desire from? Should we be getting our desires from God, or should, and specifically Jesus Christ, who modeled a very specific underthrow way of serving. He rules through service and through love. Should we be imitating that, or should we be caught up in the competitions in which we find ourselves with fellow human beings? So people want to discard that part and just throw it away. If you take the 10 commandments, you can almost divide them 4 and 6 between those two commands. And one of them says, have no other gods before me. And people say, well, I don't need God. But it seems like the more that we've driven God out of the culture, the more political conflict has come. In politics, if I could classify the last 10 years, we were very much a greedy, money-driven culture. The last 10 years, we've become very much a political culture. Politics is seeped into everything. It's in every crevice, and it's divided every institution, most notably, like we just discussed in the episode we did with Doug Stewart, within the church.
Within the church. Yep.
So we are steeped in kind of some kind of original sin, and the way that the mechanism that has been perennial throughout history to solve all of this is to figure out who to blame for our problems. And there's the original sin. So, I'm not responsible. Someone else is responsible for my troubles.
We're calling the default position original sin.
Today I'm okay with that. Maybe tomorrow I won't be, but today, as I was preparing for this episode, I'm okay with that suggestion.
Well, I mean, as operationally, it makes for good conversation, but we have Genesis 1 to deal with.
Where God made us, or
yeah, perfect.
In his image.
Yeah. And that, by the way, does not mean, for those who are new, that we're all the same. That image of God has, 8 billion different mimetic expressions here on Earth, we might say. How do we deal with that? I mean, this is the great problem, right, of life, is to reconcile the default position, which we can call theologically original sin, with the aspiration to those 2 great commandments.
Yeah, I'm not, just to be clear, and I understand your resistance to original sin, I'm not advocating an idea that we are all rotten and we are all just terrible and we all just really suck.
That's what I needed to hear you say. Yeah.
We're such dredge that that nothing is possible. That is a very unnuanced view.
Yes.
And I don't think it's warranted. I do think that it's very easy for a heart to turn to wickedness. And the story tells us that one of the ways that this can happen, the biblical story, is by attachment to a mob. It's by attachment to blame. It's by attachment to what I call covetous rivalry.
Right. The lower levels of consciousness that don't serve you actually very well.
Yeah, and so you're bringing up a way that other people have alternative paths for addressing this, right?
Yeah.
Because you're a fan of this consciousness level approach.
Sure, Christ consciousness is the ultimate, level on that list.
So I'm not really of the view that I can work my way out of this. What I believe the biblical story is attempting to tell me is that I get out of this by having by letting go and by having a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's the way that that's the way to live in this awareness. There's no then the rituals that we have, and communion being the most significant one within faith, is a way to bring me back to a place where I'm reminded of where I'm supposed to be, not what I'm supposed to do, but who I'm supposed to be.
Well, Tim, what's his name, DeRoche says, and I'll quote it, "I've come to believe that an individual's capacity for evil should never be underestimated." That seems a little scary to me, because I know you, Jim, and I know what you're working on, and you are not an evil man. I don't know if you have capacity for evil or not, but Tim suggests that we all do.
Okay, so I guess that comes down to what is evil. First, I believe evil exists. I believe it's a real phenomena. I think it's undeniable, actually. So what is evil? This is this thing that has gotten conflated and confused, where certain people have taken their moral views, which are their personal values of and standards of behavior, and they've conflated certain morality positions with good and evil.
Sure. Yeah, you can't dance because, that's evil.
Right. Okay. So those things are not evils. Evil is harming other human beings.
So thoughts on their own are neither good nor bad, but the action based on those thoughts?
Okay, so if you're going to nurture or keep a thought in place, this is actually, Desert Fathers, ancient,
Yeah, that's why I'm
Orthodox,
going there.
ancient Orthodox approach. They actually thought of sin as a developing process, an evolving process that started with, okay, I can't really control what pops into my head, but I can control what stays there to some
Yes.
degree. I have this ability to nurse certain ideas. And so I will split hairs here and suggest that if you begin nursing a given idea of harm to another, that's a problem. And Jesus said that if you called your brother a fool, which you basically said is I want to murder him. It is murder. The murder happened here before it happens externally, and maybe it never happens externally. But there are ways you can murder your brother without actually violently taking their life.
Yes.
You can libel and slander and gossip and do various things to harm their reputation. You can work to undermine them. And we see this happen all over the place. So we've got a whole world arranged by hierarchies. And in these hierarchies, people are competing to be at the top. And everybody's problem is with everybody else. So I'm in a situation right now where I've been consulted on something. I will not get into what it is or who it was. But more than one person I've talked to in different facets of this problem has tried to dredge up the past and suggest so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that. And I'm there to advise on what should happen next. And I have had to be blunt and say, I don't care what happened in the past. I don't care. It's not useful to me right now. It's not useful to you either, but you're not going to waste my time with this. No exaggeration, I said, I don't care. Because those things are holding everybody back. Those things are keeping people from making forward progress. They're dwelling on things that have little to no productive value.
Yeah,
the one value it has, maybe you don't want to work with that person, or maybe you guys know you're not a good fit. That might have some value. Maybe that person will lie to you or harm you if they have the opportunity. There is merit to having that knowledge. But dwelling on that problem and blaming them for where you're at today is not going to help you solve the problem in front of you. The problem's still there. What are you going to do to solve the problem in front of you? And so, but I can't help noticing they're all spending, it's almost inevitable in these conversations that we have to talk about who's to blame for this and who's to blame for that. And as the blame spreads out, it fans out, it really gets out to people who aren't even culpable. So Girard is interested in the fact that throughout history in mythology, somebody may have been culpable, but they were blamed for the entire thing. They were held ultimately responsible.
Yeah, that's
and
how
they were sacrificed.
Works, right? So you just
exactly.
identify.
The great thing about the Judeo-Christian story is the whole Christian story is rooted in it starts off as Hebrew and then becomes Christian. So the roots that are there. Right at the very beginning, the Cain and Abel story is different from all mythology because we find out that Abel's innocent and his blood is innocent. And the very next thing Cain goes to do, he forms a city. He builds a city, right? So that's the founding of it. We see it's already there, but it's made much more clear in the crucifixion, the trial and crucifixion of Jesus. Caiaphas stands up as the high priest of the people. He's their representative. And he said it is better that one man should die than that the nation should perish. And that sums up the scapegoating view to a T.
Yep, perfect. Unfortunately, it didn't help. I mean, if you're looking at that from a Roman perspective, what did they really accomplish?
Well, I don't... For me, it's the fact that I can look at that story and I can learn from it now. It's the story that inverts all mythology.
Well, yeah, true. But what I'm saying is, like, on the ground at the time, killing Jesus didn't really do anything. Except
it gave catharsis to a mob.
yeah.
And this is the problem, is that sacrifice doesn't end. So we spend our time dwelling on the things that have happened to us in the past, and then we go into the future and we collect new things that are now our new past. And we keep needing to see people destroyed so that we can gain catharsis, and then we can say, hey, see, it wasn't really my fault.
And
I had
Girard
no
says
role to play here.
This is going to continue forever.
Right.
If you're Girard.
So how do you get off that merry-go-round? How do you get off that?
Exactly. How do you? And for heaven's sake, remembering that merry-go-round every year on Good Friday, if we could change the nature of that practice, maybe we'd have a shot at getting off the merry-go-round. Because
Yes.
hey, I'm just saying, 2,000 years and this is progress.
Yes.
Here we are.
Yes. And I again want to emphasize, I try to make this show as inclusive as possible. Come at this however you need to get there. But I think the shortest cut, the most efficient path is through Jesus Christ. And this story of this weekend is that shortcut. This is the one that lays it all out and shows you all of its parts. And so you look and say, okay, wait a minute. It doesn't do any good to destroy someone who is only partially, or in this case, completely innocent, partially guilty or completely innocent. Even if someone has some guilt in a situation, their destruction will not necessarily solve the problem.
So what can we offer the mob that's all about destruction?
First, I would say stay away from mobs.
Okay,
I think one of the awareness things that I have is that mobs are dangerous.
I'm with you on that, especially if it's like a libertarian mob. Sorry, I had to make you laugh.
You're gonna make me cough. You're gonna make me cough. I can't enjoy good laughter right now.
So we stay away from the mob, but there's like a change of heart that needs to take place here. And what are we replacing the mob heart with? Better, right? Oh my gosh, are we going to get him back? He'll be back in a minute. But so the question is, instead of being a member of the mob, which can feel good, especially if you're marching to across the bridge in Selma, or you're following Jesus, if you were fortunate enough to be back there, or you're following Gandhi. You've been in a mob, right? We just had a nationwide protest that was a rather respectful mob. But how do you?
I want to distinguish. When I use mob, I mean it purely pejoratively.
Pitchforks and torches.
Yeah,
right?
I believe that people can organize and march. I don't think an organized march is a bad thing. And in fact, the march that went across the bridge in Selma is understanding the scapegoating mechanism and playing power under. So the way it works is it literally says, bring the violence to me, hurt me. Go ahead, do it. I will take it. And that's following or imitating Christ. They literally put themselves in a position. Now, it's very savvy. It's very sharp. It organizes this principle in such a way. And thank God that on top of that, we have eyewitnesses and cameras, because then people can see the imagery of it and they can be revolted by what they have witnessed. And so rather than pick up sticks or bricks and go do destruction, which is what the mob would do, the march says, no, come at us with your violence. We will not pick up sticks. We will not throw bricks. And we're not even going to lose our temper. We're going to train very hard before we go into this at what it's going to be like to have dogs and fire hoses and people shouting at us and cursing us and hitting us and shoving us, and how to deal with what's going to happen inside me. As I feel this fear, as I feel threatened, as I feel my ego being challenged, I want to fight. I'm going to learn how to resist that and accept it. So there's a difference I want to make between the march and the mob. And every time you hear me use mob, I mean that's a group that's going to pick up and use violence to achieve their ends, which is, by the way, the entire political structure. It's all everybody understands. And we've baptized this. So, there's this guy, Carl Schmitt. He's important because even after the Nazi years were over, we still have people operating in his form of governance. This idea of an executive, a strong executive, who is unencumbered by democracy. And he's unencumbered because democracy is damned inefficient. It is so incompetent and so poorly managed and so unable to get things done that we have to have this high executive. And that's the thing that Schmitt is most remembered for. But before he wrote about executive power, which is being wielded in our country today by the current president, by governors during the worldwide sickness, this power to push aside our entire constitutional order and behave as if they are the dictator or king. Before he wrote about that, he wrote about something called political theology. And in political theology, he suggested that there are, certain things that we just simply cannot agree on. You, Bill, and I can't agree on certain things, and these values are mutually contradictory. And because we still have to figure out how to coexist, there's only one way to solve them, and that is one of us has to get the power to make the final decision over the other. And that's why politics is the most important thing. It becomes the top of Olympus. It becomes like the gods. Politics is the gods. And then from there, he develops his executive, who will actually be the person that sits on that Olympus. So we think that the way that we're going to save ourselves is to get into this realm of politics and fix this and fix that and whatever. And we've got all these great plans for what we're going to do. But what we never discussed is whose heads we're going to crack to do it. Because we're high and mighty and we mean well in what we're doing. But inevitably, when we give this power to the state, it means somebody's going to have to get their eggs broken.
Sure.
It won't be me that my eggs that get broken when we make the omelet. It'll be your eggs that get broken when we make our delicious omelet. Yep. But we're going to ignore the fact that we had to break some eggs. Well, no, not completely, because I believe we've entered into an era right now where people are once again openly discussing they do want to break certain people's eggs. And this is the thing that they enjoy. They talk about the delicious tears of their enemies, and they enjoy seeing people suffer who they believe were to blame for the situation in which we find ourselves, whatever that situation is, whatever the enemy is.
Look at the on-again, off-again tariffs and their effect on the world economy and the doubling down within hours of backing down that's going on. This is political insanity.
It is political insanity. So, there's people who are like, oh, this is clever, this is sharp, this is whatever. But the fact of the matter is that in that construction, I'm not dealing with all of the economic implications. I'm not dealing with the entire...
Just within the political...
Within that structure, there's something spiritual going on. And it's this same phenomena where someone else is to blame for our circumstances. And they have to be punished.
Jim, I wouldn't call that spiritual. I would call that Girardian, but I don't know that it's got a spiritual component to it.
Okay, so I use the term spiritual, and a lot of people automatically see this is where the language gets corrupted, and no one is more to blame than the religious people. But the people say spiritual, and they think I mean religious. So we don't have an adequate name for the deep psychology that goes on with any people where ideas almost gather an animating power. So an idea has no hands and feet, has no bite, has no speech, it doesn't have any of those things. The idea needs to fill human beings who will then carry that idea out. And they are motivated by the ideas very powerfully. There are all kinds of explanations for human behavior. The most famous one in our age is evolutionary. But we do a host of things as human beings that have nothing to do with conferring advantage on our descendants.
That's true.
I mean, a whole bunch of things. The list is too long to spend time on it here.
Most of what we do.
So there's an animating set of ideas that cause us to become the hands and the feet and the mouth for these ideas. And why, and again, and people do this in a mob, they'll even surrender their identity to this. This is so we start to talk about demonic influence. Okay. And again, I'm not getting into religion here. I'm getting into the fact that there's like this evil spirit that almost seems to come over the crowd. And now they're willing to do harm and violence in a way that one-on-one they wouldn't have individually do. When two people are together one-on-one, it is a lot more rare, especially if they're sober, for them to get in any trouble with one another. It's not normal. It's when there's groups and they start to, show off in front of their friends or whatnot, or they get caught up in this idea and they think that they've got to fight for it. Their ego gets going, the amygdala goes off. They feel this fight or flight thing happening over a mere debate over what we should do, over something that a lot of times we have no control over. Like, we could sit and discuss Israel-Palestine here right now, but no matter what you think or what I think about that issue, it's not going to change anything over there one lick. So should I, if I disagree with one of your positions, punch you in the mouth? Should I go away and start telling my friends what a bad guy you are? How mad I am at you that you would hold such an aberrant or stupid or evil view of the world?
But Jim, that's how it works these days.
That is exactly how it works. And there's your scapegoating mechanism in play.
Right.
And when you
except it doesn't like sacrifice anything. Because that scapegoat, you try to make somebody else to blame for it, but that doesn't actually ritualize the process. It's just
but you still have this At-One-Ment that's broken up.
And it separates the At-One-Ment. It separates the relationship is ended.
The relationship is damaged by this.
Yeah.
It's damaged by this. And I'm suggesting, going all the way back to the beginning of the show, that what grace is about is recognizing that underdog, recognizing even the person who's my enemy still deserves God's love.
Unmerited favor.
Yes. So, tolerance is a good thing. Libertarians all get tolerance. Okay. They understand it, at least intellectually. And they're willing to say, yes, we believe in tolerance. Okay. And then forgiveness is better. Well, now we're starting to get into tricky water here, right? Well,
right?
I can forgive so-and-so, but, I still hope he goes to hell, right? Like, that starts to get a little more difficult, but forgiveness is better, right? It means you've done something against me and I'm going to absolve you of that. And you know what? That is At-One-Ment. That is an important part of At-One-Ment. But grace says, I don't care whether you come to me. I'm going to go the extra mile. I'm going to give you the shirt off my back. I'm going to love you anyway. That's the grace. That's the that's kind of the gold standard in all of this.
The crazy thing is that grace doesn't it doesn't come with horns and whistles and, a mob of people and pitchforks or anything that you could actually say is that there's grace happening right now. Look at that. You don't see that.
It's more of a solitary thing, which is why relationship with God then comes to matter. Who are you doing this for? Who are you doing this with? Or will I do this if I'm all by myself and I'm the only person in my physical proximity that gets it?
I'd like to suggest that in order to have a church organization and make it work, that individual moment that happens between you and God isn't enough. You've got to have a structure and an organization and a bunch of people willing to shout crucify him in order to have an organization to support the promulgation of this idea that it's really all just about you and God.
Okay, so given that I'm I'm going to downscale that a bit. I'm going to suggest that you have to find your tribe. You have to find people that you can sit down and you can really talk. I mean, really, really, really talk in a profound, deep way about your existence and what you're experiencing and what you're going through.
Sure, that's Daryl Davis, right? And it's the Palestinian and Israeli military veterans who get together in secret and talk.
And that's talking to enemies, but I am suggesting that in your spiritual practice of this, bringing up your awareness of it, dealing with the heavy issues that are involved, I have to have alliances and friends, and that's what a church is supposed to be. A church is not a building. It's a set of relationships. Just like there's a relationship with you have God, you also have this relationship with other people. It's a set of relationships. Relationship is the key to this whole thing. We're trying to figure out how to relate to one another. At-One-Ment is a relationship concept.
With you on all of this.
It is interesting, however, that DeRoche brings up revisiting his Catholic Church after being raised in it, then going for decades as an agnostic, and then returning and participating in the Passion Play.
He's kind of looking for something. I get the feeling that he hasn't found it, but he's looking.
And in that Passion Play, I don't know where this is. I'm not a Catholic, so I don't know enough about this, but I found this very interesting and compelling. That they said, here's what he writes. He said, "We were asked to play the role of the murderous mob, shouting, 'Crucify him.' They asked us to identify not with the suffering Christ, but with the vicious mob that cheers his death." There was this universal culpability that goes there. Later in the piece, he brings up one of the divisions that we've got going on in our society right now. And I think it's one that's on the rise, as does he, which is anti-Semitism. He considers this an early warning sign and a dangerous phase of scapegoating. I think there's something similar happening right now here in 2025 with the immigrant. There's been a heavy association of blame for the situation in which we find ourselves economically and culturally. And the most powerless amongst us have been singled out. So let me back up. I want to say two things. One, I want to say about the anti-Semitism. I think it's actually literally going to get worse because of some of the policies our government is pursuing right now. And the way that those policies are being pursued, where certain voices must be silenced. And even within the immigrant community, they have to be sucked out and shipped out because they believe something that is literally a heresy. That's again, a spiritual word shows up here, right? Heresy. You say, well, there's no religion going on here, but then look at what the state's doing. We're saying that certain things can't be said in campus newspapers, and we have to ship people out for having held these views. That's a really dangerous place to be, and it's going to make anti-Semitism worse. And in the Passion Play, there's a history of this where probably in many of the early renditions of this that went on throughout the medieval era, where this was being taught to people, there probably was a strong anti-Semitic component to it. There seems to be historical evidence for this fact. So how is that possible if everybody's shouting, crucify him? Because what you can't blame and say that one race or one group of people are the Christ killers. You can't say it's the Romans. You can't say it's the Jews. They're just humans. Everybody's participating in it, and we're all supposed to. The thing we're supposed to derive from the story is that we all played a role in it. We all drove the nail. Mel Gibson wanted to make this point clear in his controversial movie, The Passion.
Yep.
There's a scene where the nail is actually driven into Christ's hand. All you see is Christ's extended arm on the cross, a Roman soldier's hand holding the spike, and the other hand swinging the hammer that drives in the nail. The hand that was driving the nail was Mel Gibson's. And he did that on purpose. He used his directorial discretion to say, I wanted to identify that I am the person that drove the nail. And if everyone believes themselves responsible for this and capable of this, it's not that everybody is so evil in their constant, or that they're scumbags, right? It's not that everybody's there. It's the fact that we do drive nails on people. And being aware of the fact that these feelings can come up within us, we are the ones. In fact, in the communion setup in the church, we're basically being asked to transfer all of those to Christ. All your hatreds, all your whatever, put them on Christ. And we all know that that's an impossible thing to do. He's not guilty. So what does that mean we have to do with them? It means we got to let him go. And then too, to say that the immigrants, who are like the most powerless people in our society, are responsible for all of our troubles. The people who caused the trouble in power, and the people who supported those people and put them in power, the voters, say we're not responsible for our own situation. We didn't crucify anybody. We're innocent. We're completely blameless. It's these immigrants over here that are the cause of the problem. But I promise you, if we shipped every single one of them out by tomorrow, we wouldn't be better off. And I'm not just talking the normal economic reasons for that. I'm not just talking the humanitarian reasons for all of that. I'm talking about the fact that we would still be stuck with us. And we need to move on and find someone else to blame. And that's the issue that we have to deal with on this Good Friday weekend.
Jews and Christians are unique with that perspective. And DeRoche points that out. Judaism and Christianity are subversive in this because we see beyond the scapegoat. So, doesn't it behoove us to get the scapegoat thing done and move on?
we're not going to get it done. It was done at the cross, in my humble opinion, but there's nothing that we are going to do except to form relationship and seek At-One-Ment. My de minimis request or hope is that libertarians see that they are actually offering people a very spiritual idea, and that the only way that even our libertarianism can work, our libertarian party can work, our libertarian movement can work, is if we can learn to stop scapegoating and choose grace instead.